The year of our Lord 1348 dawned with a chilling promise of hardship. Across the narrow sea, whispers of a pestilence, darker than any seen before, reached English ears. Though dismissed as outlandish tales by some, Sir William de Bohun felt a cold dread creeping into his bones, a premonition of trials to come. Even the land itself seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the inevitable. A week later, a coded message arrived, its origins unknown. The script was unfamiliar, the symbols hinting at a deeper, more sinister game afoot. It spoke of shadows gathering around the throne, of a plot against King Edward, a conspiracy that threatened to unravel the fragile peace of England. Duty called. Leaving his estate in the hands of his steward, William gathered a small company of his most trusted men-at-arms and set out for Westminster. The king needed to be warned, and William was determined to deliver the message, no matter the cost. The royal court at Westminster buzzed with the usual mix of ambition and intrigue. Lords and ladies, each vying for the king's favor, filled the halls. Whispers of tournaments and alliances mingled with the growing unease concerning events on the continent. France, ever the thorn in England's side, was amassing troops, threatening to break the fragile truce and plunge the two kingdoms back into war. Presented before the king, William recounted the events of the past weeks, laying bare his concerns. Edward, a seasoned warrior and shrewd politician, listened intently, his expression growing more somber with each passing word. The threat of war with France was paramount, but the specter of treachery within his own court could prove even more devastating. Meanwhile, in the labyrinthine corridors of the royal administration, Geoffrey Le Baker, a rising clerk, meticulously recorded the king's decrees and managed the flow of information. Ambitious and quick-witted, Geoffrey saw opportunity where others saw only drudgery. He knew the secrets held within those documents were valuable, and he was not above using them to his advantage. On the king's orders, William began his investigation, delving into the shadowy underbelly of Westminster. He sought out informants, men and women who traded in secrets, hoping to find a lead, a name, anything to unravel the conspiracy. The city, already tense with anticipation of war, now felt suffocating, the air thick with suspicion. Knowing the cryptic message needed deciphering, William sought the aid of Sister Agnes, a Benedictine nun renowned for her knowledge of languages and codes. Sequestered within the walls of her convent, she possessed a sharp intellect and a keen eye for detail, skills that would prove invaluable in the days to come. Unbeknownst to William, Geoffrey Le Baker was playing a dangerous game. He had cultivated contacts within the French embassy, men who were willing to pay handsomely for information about England's war preparations. The temptation of wealth and power proved too strong, and Geoffrey found himself walking a treacherous path, his loyalty to the crown wavering with each passing day. As William continued his investigation, a new horror descended upon London. The first cases of the Black Death began to appear, turning the bustling city into a breeding ground for fear and despair. People collapsed in the streets, their bodies ravaged by the merciless plague. The whispers of conspiracy were now drowned out by the agonizing cries of the dying. Despite the growing chaos, William pressed on. He knew that the conspiracy, whatever its nature, posed a greater threat now that the kingdom was weakened by disease. He pored over maps, piecing together fragments of information, searching for a pattern, a connection that would lead him to the heart of the plot. Finally, Sister Agnes succeeded in deciphering the message. The truth was more shocking than William could have imagined. The conspiracy reached the highest echelons of the court, implicating men who had sworn an oath to protect the king. Their goal was to destabilize the kingdom, to weaken England to the point where France could easily invade. The race to save the crown had begun, and time was running out. The pestilence arrived in London like a thief in the night. One day, life continued as usual. The next, the city was gripped by a terror unlike any seen before. I watched as the dead were carted away, a grim procession that became all too commonplace. Even amidst the chaos, some saw opportunity. Geoffrey, ever the opportunist, trafficked in information, whispers and rumors becoming currency in these desperate times. The marketplace, once a vibrant hub, now stood desolate. Fear had emptied the stalls, and I searched for any thread, any clue to the unrest that festered beneath the surface of this plague-stricken city. Within the quiet of the nunnery, Sister Agnes toiled, her sharp mind deciphering the secrets concealed within the coded letters. Her skills were more vital than ever in these dark days. The plague provided cover for clandestine meetings. In the shadows, plots thickened, fueled by fear and desperation. I watched unseen, as the conspirators gathered, their whispers like venom in the night air. Geoffrey's ambition was a dangerous flame. He danced with shadows, accepting payment for information that could unravel the kingdom. His loyalty, it seemed, was easily bought. The coded messages, combined with Geoffrey's indiscretions, painted a grim picture. A map of London, marked with strategic locations, revealed a pattern, a calculated plan to exploit the city's vulnerability. Even within the sacred walls of the nunnery, the pestilence found its way. Sister Agnes, though shielded from the worst of the city's horrors, could not escape the shadow of death. The time for shadows was over. I confronted Geoffrey, his face paling as I laid bare his treachery. His ambition had blinded him, leading him down a path of betrayal. With Geoffrey's confession, the scope of the conspiracy became clear. I gathered what men I could trust and moved against the conspirators, the plague-ridden streets our battlefield. The confrontation was brutal. The conspirators, driven by desperation and greed, fought with the ferocity of cornered animals. But their plans were unraveling, their treachery exposed. The conspiracy was broken, but the shadow of the Black Death remained. The kingdom was wounded, weakened, but not broken. And as I looked out over the ravaged city, I knew that the fight for England's survival had only just begun. The air hung thick with the stench of unwashed bodies and the metallic tang of fear, even this far from the heart of London. William knew the plague had touched even these hallowed grounds, yet his purpose drove him onward. He sought refuge and guidance within these ancient walls. Agnes had been expecting him. A message, discreetly delivered weeks prior, had forewarned of his arrival. She knew the gravity of the situation, the weight of the secrets she held, and the peril that now threatened the kingdom. Agnes, this message, it was recovered from a messenger traveling from Calais. My sources suggest it contains information that threatens the king himself. Agnes took the parchment, her fingers tracing the unfamiliar symbols. This is no common cipher, William. It appears to be a complex polyalphabetic substitution, possibly incorporating elements of alchemical nomenclature. William knew Agnes's sharp mind was his best hope. Her late father, a scholar of some repute, had tutored her in languages and codes, skills far exceeding those of most men, let alone women cloistered away from the world. My father believed in the power of knowledge, William. He sought wisdom in every text, every tongue. He would often speak of the importance of understanding one's enemies, of knowing their secrets. He knew Agnes's connection to the crown ran deeper than mere loyalty. Her family had served Edward's grandfather, Edward I, with unwavering dedication. Their knowledge, passed down through generations, had often been crucial in maintaining the peace. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the scratching of Agnes's quill and the rustling of parchment. The air grew thick with the unspoken dread of what they might uncover. Meanwhile, Geoffrey Le Baker, his fingers stained with ink, scanned through the royal decrees. His mind was not on the plague nor the wars. His focus was on opportunity and how to leverage the chaos to his advantage. William, I believe I have found a key. This recurring sequence. It corresponds to the alchemical symbol for Mercury, often used to represent deception and swift change. The first fragments of the message began to coalesce. Lyon, meeting. St. Albans, Midsummer's Eve. Names, locations, dates. A conspiracy was brewing, one that threatened to engulf the kingdom in flames. William knew he had little time. Midsummer's Eve was fast approaching. He had to reach St. Albans, uncover the conspirators, and stop them before their treachery could shatter the fragile peace of England. The shadow of the crown and the plague both loomed large. Geoffrey Le Baker, a man consumed by ambition, toiled late into the night. The flickering candlelight danced across his face, highlighting the nervous energy that perpetually simmered beneath his carefully cultivated facade. Every stroke of his quill was a calculated step, each entry in the ledger a potential rung on the ladder of power. A sudden creak from the corridor sent a shiver of unease down Geoffrey's spine. He knew he dealt in secrets, and secrets had a way of attracting unwanted attention. Two men, cloaked in shadows, materialized in the doorway. Their faces were hidden, their intentions unclear, but their presence exuded a palpable air of menace. Geoffrey rose, his heart pounding against his ribs. He feigned a confident smile, but his hand instinctively sought the comfort of the small dagger he kept hidden beneath his robes. The taller of the two figures stepped into the light, revealing a face as harsh and unforgiving as the London streets. His eyes, cold and calculating, held Geoffrey in their unwavering gaze. He extended a hand, offering a tightly sealed scroll. "A message," he rasped, his voice rough and guttural, "for delivery across the channel." Geoffrey hesitated. Delivering messages to France was a perilous game, fraught with risk and potential accusations of treason. But the glint of gold in the man's eyes was a powerful lure. "Think of it as an investment," the man whispered, his breath foul and heavy. "An investment in your future." Geoffrey's mind raced. The reward was tempting, a shortcut to the influence and wealth he craved. But the price might be his very life, or worse, his loyalty to the king. Unbeknownst to Geoffrey, he was not alone. Sir William de Bohun watched from the shadows, his keen eyes missing nothing. He had been following Geoffrey for days, sensing a shift in the clerk's behavior, a hint of clandestine dealings. With a deep breath, Geoffrey made his choice. He reached for the scroll, sealing his fate with a single, fateful act. William stepped out of the darkness, his face set in a grim mask. The game had begun, and Geoffrey Le Baker had just made his opening move. The coded message Sister Agnes deciphered spoke of a rendezvous, a tavern called the Serpent's Kiss, nestled deep within the labyrinthine alleys of London. William felt the familiar knot of apprehension tighten in his stomach. This was where the threads would either unravel further or snap completely. Back at the Benedictine convent, Sister Agnes continued her work, transcribing ancient texts while her mind wrestled with the implications of the conspiracy. The weight of the secrets she now carried pressed heavily upon her. She prayed for guidance, for strength, and for the safety of Sir William. Geoffrey, in his chambers at Westminster, reviewed the financial accounts with meticulous care. He knew the information within these documents could buy him influence, power, perhaps even a title. The temptation was almost unbearable, but the risk of exposure was ever present. William watched as two men met in the alleyway behind the tavern. Their faces were obscured by the shadows, but he recognized one of them, a known associate of Lord Beaumont, a man with close ties to the French crown. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Agnes, using her knowledge of the city, cross-referenced the meeting location with known routes and properties owned by the suspected conspirators. A pattern began to emerge, a web of influence that stretched from the highest echelons of the court to the darkest corners of London. The hooded figure offered Geoffrey a substantial sum of money in exchange for information about the king's movements. Geoffrey hesitated. The rewards were great, but the consequences of being caught would be devastating. He was walking a dangerous line. William pressed the tavern owner for information about the men he had seen meeting in the alley. Fear flickered in the man's eyes. He knew more than he was letting on, but William's persistent questioning began to erode his resistance. Driven by a sense of urgency, Agnes delved into the convent's vast library, searching for any historical precedent that might shed light on the conspiracy. She sought patterns, warnings from the past that could help them understand the present. Geoffrey wrote a carefully worded letter to his contact, revealing a small piece of information, testing the waters. He needed to gauge how much they knew and how far they were willing to go. His future, and perhaps his life, depended on it. A young boy, eyes darting nervously, delivered a sealed message to William in the bustling marketplace. It was from Agnes. The message contained a vital piece of information, the name of a high-ranking official suspected of treason. Agnes prayed for strength and wisdom. The stakes were higher than ever. She had implicated a powerful man, a man close to the king. She knew that their actions could have far-reaching consequences for England. Geoffrey gazed out at the city of London, shrouded in the pall of the Black Death. He was caught in a web of intrigue, and he knew that his choices would determine not only his own fate, but perhaps the fate of the kingdom itself. London was no longer the vibrant city William knew. The Black Death had transformed it into a charnel house. Carts piled high with bodies rumbled through the streets, and the air reeked of death and decay. The once bustling marketplaces were deserted, shops shuttered, and silence, more terrifying than any scream, had descended. Even the gravediggers, hardened to death as they were, seemed overwhelmed. They worked tirelessly, their faces masked against the stench, but their eyes betrayed the fear that gnawed at them. William needed information, but approaching them felt like intruding upon their own impending doom. Geoffrey, ever the opportunist, saw the plague as a chance for enrichment. He manipulated grain prices, hoarding supplies and selling them at exorbitant rates to the desperate populace. His conscience, if he ever had one, was buried beneath a mountain of silver. Sister Agnes continued her work, but the atmosphere within the convent had grown tense. The abbess, concerned about the growing scrutiny from the king's men, had begun to question Agnes's unusual scholarly pursuits and watched her closely. William received word from one of his contacts that the abbess suspected Agnes was aiding the crown. Her safety was paramount. He needed to move her before her usefulness became a fatal liability. Agnes, understanding the danger, prepared to leave the sanctuary she had known for so long. Her heart ached at the thought of abandoning her sisters, but her duty to England and to William compelled her to act. William waited outside the convent, the silence broken only by the distant tolling of a funeral bell. Every creak and shadow sent a jolt of anxiety through him. Discovery would mean dire consequences for both Agnes and himself. Agnes slipped out of the convent unnoticed, a ghost in the night. She found William waiting, and together they disappeared into the labyrinthine streets of London, seeking a safe haven from the encroaching plague and prying eyes. William guided Agnes through the most forsaken parts of the city, where even the city watch feared to tread. He knew of a small, abandoned apothecary shop that could serve as a temporary refuge. The apothecary was in ruins, but it offered a degree of security. Barricading the door and windows, William and Agnes created a small pocket of safety amidst the chaos. Despite the grim circumstances, they continued their work. The map, recovered from the Serpent's Kiss, held the key to the conspirators' next move. Agnes's sharp mind and knowledge of languages were more crucial than ever. As William gazed out at the dying city, he knew that time was running out. The plague was a formidable enemy, but the treachery brewing within the kingdom posed an even greater threat. He had to act swiftly, before both England and its people were consumed by darkness. Geoffrey wrestled with the message burning a hole in his pouch. It detailed the conspirators' plan to leverage the chaos of the plague for their own gain, seizing key ports and destabilizing the throne. He knew this information could save lives, but it could also cost him dearly. William had grown suspicious of Geoffrey's recent activities. His increased wealth and secretive meetings hinted at a dangerous game. He positioned himself to observe, hoping to uncover the truth of Geoffrey's involvement. Geoffrey made his decision. He would deliver the message, but his conscience gnawed at him. He clutched the pouch containing the damning information, knowing that with this act, he was stepping onto a path with no turning back. William shadowed Geoffrey, carefully maintaining his distance. The clerk's furtive glances and hurried pace confirmed William's suspicions. He was on a mission, a dangerous one by the looks of it. The destination, the Drunken Rat, a known haunt for unsavory characters. Geoffrey paused, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. This was the point of no return. William remained across the street, his eyes fixed on the tavern entrance. He knew better than to walk directly in. Patience and observation were his greatest weapons. Within the dimly lit tavern, Geoffrey delivered the message to a shadowy figure cloaked in darkness. The exchange was quick and silent, a transaction of betrayal sealed with a furtive handshake. As Geoffrey emerged from the tavern, William knew he had to act quickly. The evidence was clear. Geoffrey was complicit. "Geoffrey," William's voice was low and dangerous. "You have made a grave mistake." Geoffrey's face paled, his carefully constructed facade crumbling before William's unwavering gaze. "The information you delivered, it endangers the crown, the people. Tell me everything, Geoffrey, now," William demanded. There was no room for lies, no room for half-truths. The fate of England hung in the balance. "I was promised power, influence," Geoffrey cried, his voice cracking with fear. "They said the king was weak, that a new order was needed. I was a fool." William listened, weighing Geoffrey's words. Could he trust him? Was this a genuine confession, or another layer of deceit? The truth, he knew, was the only weapon against the darkness that threatened to engulf England. The pieces were falling into place, each fragment of intercepted correspondence painting a grimmer picture than the last. It wasn't merely dissent. It was treason, aimed at the very heart of the kingdom. "The reference to the king's ailment is not literal, Sir William," Sister Agnes explained, her voice hushed. "It's a veiled term, used in certain circles to denote an assassination plot against the monarch himself. Edward's life was in imminent danger. William had to reach him, and swiftly. Every second counted. Geoffrey, his conscience a flickering flame against the roaring fire of his ambition, made his way towards Westminster Palace. The message he carried could alter the course of history, or condemn him to a traitor's fate. King Edward, burdened by the weight of the crown and the shadow of the pestilence, received petitioners in the great hall. He was unaware of the viper coiled in the grass, ready to strike. With a bow that strained his back and his integrity, Geoffrey presented the scroll to the king. "A matter of utmost urgency, your majesty," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. William and his men raced towards the palace, their horses' hooves drumming a frantic rhythm against the cobblestones. The Black Death may have thinned the crowds, but the urgency of their mission carved a path through them all. As Edward scanned the contents of the message, a cold fury settled upon his face. The conspiracy, laid bare in stark detail, was a betrayal of the most heinous kind. Geoffrey watched in horror as Sir William and his guards stormed into the hall. His gamble had failed, and the price would be steep. "Geoffrey Le Baker," William's voice boomed through the hall, "you are under arrest for treason against the crown." Geoffrey's protests were swallowed by the echoing vastness of the hall as the king's guard dragged him away, his dreams of advancement dissolving into the cold reality of imprisonment. William knelt before the king, the immediate threat averted, but the war was far from over. "The conspirators remain at large, your majesty. We must find them before they can strike again." The tavern reeked of stale ale and desperation. The air hung thick with the stench of sweat and fear, a grim testament to the plague's grip on the city. William took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. This was it. Geoffrey squirmed, his eyes darting nervously around the room. He knew this was a point of no return. The conspirators, shadowy figures he'd only met in whispers, were due any moment. His ambition had led him here, to this precipice of treason. The conspirators arrived, silent and menacing. Their faces were hidden, their intentions clear. The air crackled with tension. The game had begun. Before the conspirators could speak, William stormed into the tavern, his sword drawn. "Traitors!" he roared, his voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. "Your treachery ends here." Steel met steel. The tavern erupted into chaos as William fought with the fury of a man defending his kingdom. The conspirators were skilled, but William's experience and righteous anger gave him the edge. Geoffrey watched, paralyzed by fear. He realized the depth of the hole he'd dug for himself. There was no turning back now. He had to choose. William disarmed one of the conspirators, sending his sword clattering across the floor. He pressed his advantage, driving the remaining traitor back towards the wall. In a moment of desperate calculation, Geoffrey grabbed a dagger from the table and plunged it into the back of the remaining conspirator. The man gasped, turned, and collapsed. Geoffrey had made his choice. William stared at Geoffrey, his face unreadable. He had witnessed the clerk's treachery, but also his unexpected intervention. "Why, Geoffrey?" he asked, his voice low. Geoffrey fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "I was a fool, Sir William. Ambition blinded me. I beg you, spare me. I will do anything to make amends." Meanwhile, at the Benedictine nunnery, Sister Agnes worked tirelessly. She transcribed William's message, a desperate plea to the king, warning him of the conspiracy and the threat it posed to the throne. Agnes sealed the message and entrusted it to a swift messenger, praying for its safe delivery. The fate of England hung in the balance. The evidence lay starkly upon the king's council table, letters bearing the seals of prominent nobles, detailing their plot to destabilize the crown amidst the chaos of the plague and the looming threat of war with France. Sir William watched as Edward III's face hardened, his expression a mask of regal fury. "Treason," King Edward declared, his voice resonating with righteous anger. "These vipers, who would feast upon the carcass of our kingdom, shall be brought to swift and merciless justice. Let none say that Edward was blind to the enemies within." The king's justice was swift. William led a detachment of guards through the city's festering alleyways, tracking down the conspirators. The stench of death clung to everything, a grim reminder of the stakes. One by one, the traitors were seized. Lord Beaumont, his face pale with fear, attempted to deny his involvement, but the evidence was irrefutable. Sir Reginald, once a respected knight, spat defiance as he was dragged away. Geoffrey Le Baker watched from the shadows, his heart pounding in his chest. He had danced close to the fire, but ultimately, his ambition had steered him clear of outright treason. He knew he was not entirely innocent, but he hoped his timely betrayal of the conspiracy would be enough to save him. The conspirators faced the king's justice. Their lands and titles were forfeit, their names to be stricken from the rolls of honor. Some were imprisoned, others executed, a grim warning to any who would dare to betray the crown. With the immediate threat quelled, William found himself standing once more in the tranquil courtyard of the Benedictine convent. The air here was cleaner, the silence a balm to his weary soul. "The kingdom is safe for now," Sister Agnes said softly, her gaze meeting William's. "But the plague, it continues its grim work. The future remains uncertain." William nodded, a weariness settling upon him. "Indeed, I must return to Westminster. The king will need counsel. Thank you, Sister Agnes, for your invaluable assistance." He offered a respectful bow before turning to leave, the shadow of the plague looming large in his thoughts. Geoffrey Le Baker, thanks to his timely information, found himself promoted to a higher position within the royal administration. His new office was larger, the furnishings more opulent. He had survived the storm and emerged stronger, though the cost to his conscience remained a burden he chose to ignore. William stood in the king's garden, watching the smoke rise from the city, a constant reminder of the devastation wrought by the plague. He had saved the king for now, but the shadows of uncertainty still lingered over England. The cost of his service weighed heavily upon him. The Black Death continued its relentless march, indifferent to the intrigues of kings and conspirators. England was saved, but forever changed. The future remained shrouded in shadow, a testament to the fragility of power and the enduring strength of human resilience in the face of unimaginable horror.